sure where you're located. Are you located in St. Andrews?
I am in Scotland. Yeah, I am.
Right.
Although obviously I'm not Scottish. So,
Yeah.
I'm from the U.S. originally. So that's one of the things we can kind of get into in terms of the personal statements is the difference between how you write for U.S. schools versus the UK schools. So it's kind of what I'll try to tease out a bit in the presentation. And if I understand correctly, I'll have about 20 minutes to talk about personal statements and things like that. I do have a little bit at the end to talk about St. Andrews if we've got the time, but I really just want to be able to focus on the differences and then open up to questions. Is that
I think that
right?
that sounds perfect. 20, 10, and 5, I think that's the right balance for us. So why don't you go ahead and get started? I think it's about time, and I'll just switch off my video and over to you.
That's excellent. Well, again, thank you for joining today. And again, my name is Candace Aldrich. And as I said, I apologize if you were hoping or expecting for a Scottish accent. I'm from North Carolina on the East Coast originally. I completed my undergraduate studies in the US, and then I completed my master's degree in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh. So again, I can kind of talk about what it was also like, when we sort of get into the questions, what it's like to be an international student coming into Scotland and things like that too. But I'll really spend most of the time focusing on personal statement and how the writing style is different. So just, I always like to have pictures. So effectively, the reason why the writing style is different is because of the reason or the way you start university is different. If you think about it in terms of a spectrum, and there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, when I have England, that's really the 3-year model, which you may be familiar with in other parts of the world too. It's not just in English, or it's not just in England. We have a 3-year system. It's very focused. You're starting with a subject, you stick with that subject generally the whole way through. And it works very well for people that know exactly what they want to do and want to be very focused. The sort of next phase in that is going to be the Scottish system, which is going to be 4 years and you do start with a subject, but you can potentially change and you can explore other subjects. But like the 3-year model, you are starting with something. You do declare in sort of American vernacular, you do declare a major, but then you can change the major. You're not stuck with it. And again, you can pick up related subjects that you may be interested in. So it works really well if you're not exactly sure, but you're a science student, you're it's either English or film studies, that sort of thing. So you're not exactly sure, but you do have a general idea, or you do know what you want to do and you want to be able to customize. So you don't want to just get pigeonholed into just management or just psychology. You want to be able to put things together. And then the sort of other end is going to be the 4-year US system, which as you may know, you can be undecided, you can be undeclared when you start. And so that changes the purpose of the application because it's no longer about what you're going to study. It's more about who you are as a student coming into the university. And then over the course of the first 2 or 3 years, you figure out what your subject's going to be, what your major is going to be, and then you choose. And everybody has the core curriculum, general education requirements. Everybody has to take a little bit of everything. So it doesn't matter what your major might end up being. You can start with one if you want to. I did, but it works really well if you genuinely have no idea what you want to do, or specifically if you want to be able to cross subjects that typically aren't related. In my example, something like psychology and computer science, those can be science subjects that are related. Something like international relations and chemistry, which is what I did in my undergraduate studies, generally wouldn't work in a 3-year or the Scottish 4-year system because they're not related. They're not part of the sort of same family of subjects. So again, when you start to see these differences, what you reflect in the application is then what's different. And so you then, because you're going to be looking at what I'm talking about is the UK, you are starting with a subject. It is about the subject you're going to study, as well as who you are as a student, as opposed to it just being about you joining the university and then figuring out the academics later. You're figuring out the academics from the beginning. You're at least picking a family of subjects, or you're picking something to start with. So it is about the subject, the academic area, and your interest in it. And so it's as much about why you want to do it, what you're interested in, how you can demonstrate your academic or your research interest and abilities. Anything that you do extracurricular or supercurricular. So extracurricular might be interested in international relations and you help start the Model UN at your school. Super curricular might be you do extra reading, or you go above and beyond and read further journal articles, or you read The Economist and things like that. And not just that you do it, but what you pull from it. My interest was always European politics, for example, and I was really interested in how the European Union impacted how individual countries within Europe made their decisions. And so if I read The Economist, I might cite an article and pull out, this is what I'm interested in. Or I read this article and this highlights why I'm interested in these areas. That's the kind of thing we're going to be looking for, because again, in the UK, it is about the subject that you're starting with. And again, you also can talk about why you're suitable, what you've done. If it's politics and you did help start the Model UN, that obviously there's some obvious connections there and you can draw on those. So again, it is going to be a work of art. It's like a cover letter for a job. But again, it's going back to that first slide about that spectrum, who's going to read it, what you're writing it for, and then other things that you want to include and make sure that are in there. There's going to be other extracurriculars that you want to make sure we know, but maybe aren't directly related. Maybe you're interested in politics like I was, but you're also the football captain or the basketball captain. And that doesn't necessarily relate, but that obviously has a lot to do with how you manage your time, leadership skills, and other things like that you want us to know in terms of who you are as a student in a larger context. But usually unless it directly relates to the academic subject, we usually say ask your references, find other ways in your application to include those details. So your actual personal statement is really just focused on those academics. Now, and what we're going to look for, obviously there's going to be grades and things like that, but it's that personal statement that sits on top of it, and that's why I was going to stress that today. So it really depends on each person and how you want to write, how you're engaged with it, what you're passionate about, how you understand what's being done at the university. That isn't necessarily going to hurt you if you don't talk about it, but it just further demonstrates your interest. If you do know of a specific research that's being done, different areas, and again, any extracurricular skills too. But I've got here evidence of responsibility, transferable skills. Again, for the personal statement, it's how it relates to the subject area. Otherwise, if it's important, but if it doesn't necessarily relate directly to the academics, maybe see if your reference can include it. So we still have that in the application. Things to avoid. Some of these will seem obvious. And I do have some examples I'll go to of different personal statements or different examples of things like this, so we can talk about that. Again, it's lack of depth of awareness of the subject, so that could be applying to management and only talking about going into the family business. And obviously those are very directly related, but wanting to support your family business and wanting to study the academic study of management or business aren't necessarily obviously related. So make the connection for us. So again, it's not, don't assume we'll understand some of the connections for you. And so you want to explain the themes and the areas within that academic subject and how different things connect. Again, if you're not particularly committed to the subject, we do get applications that talk about how great the beaches in St. Andrews are, or what the application, the personal statement is really more focused on the benefits the person hopes to get from studying abroad, as opposed to the academic subject or the academic studies. So again, it's about trying to find that balance, because you obviously want to communicate your interest in the university or your interest in the study abroad, but you don't want to get, when you're looking at UK schools, you don't want to get too far away from the subject you're applying to. If you are, and again, I'll show you an example of this. You don't want to include in your personal statement that you're applying to one university and then send it to 3 or 4 other universities, because that automatically will just tell the other universities you're not as committed. Or likewise, the same thing for the subject area, because not all universities are going to call the subjects the same things. Political science at the University of St. Andrews is called international relations. So you don't want to say, I want to study politics, because that's not what we call it. So it's more about the themes you're really interested in. Again, like in my case, my example, how the European Union impacted government behavior. So it doesn't matter whether that sits within a department that's called politics, or that sits within a department that's called international relations. They're going to understand the connection. And so you just want to try to balance that out. And likewise, referring to things that the university doesn't offer. You know, in our case, engineering, for example, we have physics and math. We don't have an engineering program. So it's just about balancing that out and kind of doing your research, understanding, and trying to make that one statement that can apply across all. If you're using the UCAS system, I will talk about the US system, the Common App application system. So I will talk about that because that's a little bit different. But generally speaking, if you're talking about the UK, you're probably talking about UCAS, UCAS system, the UK's application system, and then you just get the one statement that goes to up to 5 different universities. If you do have 2 subjects that you want to apply to, it really depends on the subjects and the university. When it comes to Scottish universities, you don't have to apply to joint programs. So it really just depends. But if you are applying to joint, make sure you talk about both subjects. You don't necessarily need to make the connection between the 2, as opposed to why international relations with Spanish, as an example. But you do want to make sure you talk about both Spanish and international relations and your academic interest in those subjects, just so that we understand why you picked those 2. And again, if there's other activities that you want to make sure we know about, because again, it all comes into the picture of who you are as a student. Make sure to include them if they're in the personal statement, connect it to the academics. Otherwise, see if they can be included in other parts of the application. And obviously, don't claim things that aren't true. So it's make sure that you have statements that you can back up with evidence, cite articles, whatever it is that relates to how you're writing it. Jokes, that some of that's also personal style. So just kind of balance it out. Understand that just like things can get misinterpreted on text messages, don't assume that what you're trying to imply is going to come across to the person who's reading it, whom you've never met and won't understand the context necessarily. Again, it's all of the application systems will give you a limit, a word limit or a character limit. And so don't just fill up the space to fill up for the sake of it. But likewise, don't leave too much empty space. You want to really give this some thought, get other people to read it, particularly people who are going to know you well, your counselor, your parents, other teachers, and make sure that you're actually really exploring and getting into your interest in that academic area. I don't necessarily feel like you need to list out classes that you've taken or subjects that you've taken that relate, unless you're really going to explain or connect into. You know, I've taken IBHL, politics, or US government, or whatever it is, because I was really interested in these and we explored these themes and this is connecting to my interest. And don't just say I've taken these classes, because that's in your transcript or that's in your application already. So you don't need to explain what you've taken unless you're going to dig into that and explain the relevance for it. Again, you don't want to just list off all the things you've done. I do get students that will list off being head boy, being prefect, being head of this club, you know, and might add a line that says this has taught me leadership abilities. None of that connects to the subject that they've applied for. So again, just, you know, really think about how it connects to the academics for the personal statement section, and then other stuff, find other places for it. And again, don't think of it as a formality. Every university will process applications differently. I know, but specifically at St. Andrews, each application is read thoroughly, top to bottom, by at least 2 or 3 different people, including academics in the departments that you're applying to. So we are reading the personal statements, we are reading the references, we are reading everything that you give us in that application. So don't think you just need to kind of fill up the space so that you can submit, because actually it's going to carry a lot of weight. And I know the people that are my counterparts at a lot of other universities will say the same thing. So don't assume that, again, it's a technicality or it's a formality and it doesn't carry any weight for you. If you are applying, maybe you're doing military service, maybe there's other reasons, you've got an internship, maybe there's other reasons. If you are going to apply, if you're actually applying for next year, so you're applying in the 2020 cycle that we're in now, but it's for starting in 2021, make sure that's explained in the personal statement too, with good sort of evidence and support. Every university, again, will handle this differently, and often can depend on the context of the applicant pool that you've applied in with, the subject, how competitive it is that year, how competitive they anticipate it being next year. For example, at St. Andrews, international relations is easily one of our most competitive, popular subjects. And so it really is on a case-by-case basis if we approve a deferral for admission the next year, just because we know every year there is a space constraint. So just kind of, it may be worth contacting the universities that you're applying to first to fully understand how they'll see the deferred request. So first steps, it is a bit like a short story about yourself. I would caution you with that because that's sometimes how it's positioned for US universities, because it is a bit about who you are. It's about telling your story, a little bit about finding your voice, but always bring it back to the academics. And in the Common App application, I'll talk about in a minute, it's going to be as much about, again, there'll be free writing places. So you're not just writing the story, but this is about, again, your voice, your story, and how it relates to the academic interest that you're trying to pursue further by going to university. Again, get other people to read it, go through an editing process. Don't expect to be able to sit down and write it on a weekend or write it in an evening, because you'll want to come back, you'll want to visit it. And as you look across the different universities that you decide to apply to, that may also inspire you to include other bits of information. So give yourself some time to actually write this out. I've known of students who've gone through several iterations before they finally got to the statement that they wanted to include on the application to submit. But I talk to everyone, and you'll get ideas from your peers, but you also get people to look at it who aren't familiar with this process, and they may be able to say, I don't really understand why you put this line here, it doesn't connect. And then you can tease that out some more. Other ideas that we generally recommend, do watch the character count, but you may want to kind of build up a checklist and make sure you talk about certain things. Make sure you got a link there to current information about what's happening in that field or that area. Make sure you're demonstrating that you understand it and highlighting your knowledge of the subject. We obviously don't expect you to know everything. And depending on what you're applying to, your school may not offer subjects that would directly relate. You may be applying to do sustainable development with us and your school doesn't offer a class called sustainable development. So we don't expect you to be an expert. But what do you know about sustainability? What do you know about earth science or biology and how it connects with the environment, that sort of thing. And again, on the checklist, do I show my motivation? Do I show my interest? What is sort of the future career track or plans or ambitions that you might have? Maybe you don't know, I want to work for X company, or I want to work in the private sector, or I want to work in my family business, but you do know you're interested in you're interested in microfinance, you're interested in local companies. And you can, as a way to demonstrate your interest and your passion for the subject, talk about what your next steps and what your ambitions are. But again, always bring it back to the academic interest. Obviously, do check your spelling and grammar. A lot of that gets taken care of for us nowadays anyways, but particularly syntax and things like that. Sometimes, again, the editing process will help you capture some of that. Again, and like I said, give it to someone else to read. Let other people look at it, just to make sure you've got other eyes and other voices to help you tighten it up. So there are 25 UK institutions who are on the Common App. Again, all of them are also going to be on UCAS, obviously. Generally speaking, as I understand it, the advice is to use UCAS if there's a UK institution that's not on the Common App. Otherwise, if you're on the Common App, if you're going to be using that, and you're just talking about 1 or 2 schools in the UK that are also on the Common App, you can just use the Common App and do those 2 schools. It isn't meant to be a way to get around that 5 limit that the UCAS system has. So it just sort of depends on your own situation. But generally speaking, if it is UCAS, unless you're using the Common App and it's just a couple of schools. Obviously, also, if it's just 1 UK school, you could just apply to them directly. So it does kind of depend on what strategy makes the most sense for you, and your counselors will also be able to help guide you on that. But again, there's going to be a very different focus, because if you go back to that first slide about how people start, why they go to university, how those applications are handled at US institutions, it's going to be very different. The Common App is the application system is designed to tease out everything about who you are as a student, and it never really getting to the subject you want to study. There'll be places for you to list them, but quite often the prompts that you get on the application form don't actually ask you to talk about that. You'll have the personal essays, where it could be a storytelling exercise. It has nothing to do with your subject. And so the application system is set up differently. Each UK institution that is on the Common App will have a supplementary prompt, and that will be the section for you to talk about your academics. That personal statement section I was talking about for UCAS. So just be aware that there are going to be different deadlines for the system too. It'll have its own word limits and that sort of thing. So again, it's just remembering that focus and using up the space that's there, and try to demonstrate your academic abilities as well as your research. And just try to remember everything that you put in the statement, bring it back. Why am I putting this in there? Why is it relevant to why I'm picking this subject? And again, if it's on the Common App, it'll be in that supplementary statement. It won't be in what's called the personal essay section, because that's a free writing, that's a free space. So just kind of bear in mind, depending on what application system you end up using. So this is an example of a personal statement. And right off the bat, you can see in the highlighted sections, this person talked about a specific university. So automatically it implies the other universities they've applied to are ruled out. They've also talked about subjects, obviously this came into St. Andrews, they talked about subjects we don't offer, like chemical engineering. We do offer chemistry, but we don't offer chemical engineering. And so we inherently will then begin to be concerned that this student doesn't fully understand what they could do with us, what the difference between chemical engineering versus an academic study of chemistry might be. And then they've also listed, they've just listed out the classes they're taking without explaining a connection, and why that's relevant to the passion for the subject area that they've chosen. And likewise, this empty space at the bottom is how it came across in the application. They didn't use the full space that was there. So it just gives you an example of, again, some of the common mistakes that we see. Just real quick with St. Andrews, I've mentioned a little bit about how we do it. This is what St. Andrews looks like. It makes it look a lot bigger than it really is. But I like this picture because we don't get as much rain as the rest of the UK. So when you think about that British stereotype, you're not going to get as much rain. And because of the way we're coastal, we're right on the water. You can see the beaches in the picture. So it's a nice picture for that reason. We're quite international. Including our staff, but the student body is almost 40% from outside of the UK. And it pairs into a really sort of cosmopolitan bubble in the town that impacts the student experience as well as the experience living in the town. The staff like myself are from all over. And when you factor in things like I was talking about before, that Scottish system and flexible degree structure, there's over 900 different subject combinations. And so it is a very sort of, again, international, yet supportive environment. I've got the statistic here, 97% continuation rate. It's a useful statistic to use in addition to league table rankings and things like that. Continuation rate is the dropout rate between the first and the second year. So it can be a useful another measurement as you're building your university list that you want to apply to, because that dropout rate or that continuation rate tells you how the students are supported and how satisfied they are with their experience at the university. These are some of our league table rankings. Something else to bear in mind is national rankings and international rankings are different. They will use different metrics to build their ranking system. International ranking systems tend to be very research focused. So they're actually measuring how much research each institution produces, how often that research is cited by other researchers. So inherently bigger universities with more research staff will just fare better. But there's other things. There's the student satisfaction survey that's done in the UK. There's a teaching excellence framework and a research excellence framework. And these all give you further context for each institution, not just the sort of blanket league table rankings, but understanding what's going on behind there, as well as other stats to help you get a better picture about what it would be actually like for you to be there and what your experience would be like. Oh, that didn't work out well, did it? This is just a list of the different subjects. I can talk about that some more. We are a small to medium-sized university, so we don't do everything. I mentioned before, we have physics and math. We don't have an actual engineering department. We do have a school of medicine, but we don't do nursing. So it's it's all part of the research as you build your list of the places that you're going to apply to. As old as we are, one of the beautiful things being American is how old and how traditional some of the institutions in the UK are. We have a tradition of academic families that is it's a buddy system, and it's a pay it forward. 4 centuries students have just been paying it forward to help look after each other, which blows my mind that in every year people just know, okay, now it's my turn. I adopt somebody else coming in from the next group. And it's just how they've looked after each other. And we've had traditions that have built up around that sense of family or sense of community. And there's other things that we do. I've got listed here, and I can always go into that in more detail if you're interested. But that's it. These are my contact details. My WhatsApp number is there, as is the main email that you can use. But I'll go ahead and I'll also put this in the chat. And I'll stop sharing the slides for now, and then we can kind of open it up for questions and things like that.
Superb, Candice. Thank you so much for that. That was so apt, I think, for the audience, in such a useful manner, because students have been thinking about their UK personal application statements on the UCAS, but St. Andrews is one of those rare universities in the UK that also uses the Common App. Yeah. I know maybe I missed this part, but is there a preference for one over the other?
Not at St. Andrews. I think it have it as one of the slides, but it didn't talk about it per se or directly. But we don't have preference. So it's whatever makes the most sense. We're not going to prioritize one system over another. Obviously, if you apply directly, that does tell us you shouldn't be applying to any other schools in the UK. But we know there's the Common App and other things like that out there. So we don't handle the applications differently based on how you apply.
All right. That's great. And the next one is kind of one of these silly questions that I always get, and I just would love for you to answer it. UK English versus US English. Do you really want students to switch over to the UK style of English?
Yeah, it does not matter. I can tell you, when I came over from the US to do my master's about 12 years ago, which kind of dates me, it did matter. I had some heated discussions with professors about where brackets go and things like that. Nowadays, it doesn't matter, and I think particularly because not only the growth of the global economy, but because of how international our faculty base is. You've got American professors, you've got British professors, and Indian professors, and European professors, and so everybody understands there's different ways of spelling things, and you're not going to get marked off because you don't add the extra OU in color or something like that. So there's not a difference. You're not going to be marked down or anything like that. No.
It's just one of those questions I get every year, and I thought it would be great if you could address it. Another thing I've noticed, is at least with the US applications, there's always a clear date of what's the last day to apply and when you can expect to hear back. With the British and the UK colleges, I've always seen like acceptance letters on a rolling basis. Is that how you do it? I mean, because I've always seen, I've seen sometimes within 48 hours acceptance letters coming in.
Yep. So if you're for St. Andrews, and again, every university will be slightly different, but if you're for St. Andrews, if you are an international student for your tuition fees, and I say it that way because you may have dual citizenship, but your permanent residence is overseas. And so it's, if when you apply, if we assess your fee category, your tuition fee category is international, then the admissions pool that you go into is handled on a rolling basis. 48 hours would be a phenomenal turnaround time. I would say we probably average more like about 4 weeks. Again, because I was saying earlier, it's fairly high touch. There's a panel of people that review every application, so there's 2 or 3 people, so it just takes some time to get through it. And there are some exceptions for like international relations, some of our more competitive and popular subjects, but it is rolling. So the earlier you apply, the sooner you'll know. If your fee category could be British or European right now, pre-Brexit, before the end of 2020, there's a different application process. There's a different pool you go into. Those are handled differently. There is a rolling element to it, but a lot of the decisions end up coming out in March. So again, it kind of depends on the fee category you end up going into for your tuition, and then how it's handled from there. Yeah.
Super, thank you.
But
And the last,
generally, I would say the other big difference you'll get in the U.S. is there'll be sort of set times, and they will also rescind offers. At least at St. Andrews, and I don't know of any other UK institution that might do this. We don't rescind offers, so it might take us a little bit longer to get you to the decision, but then that decision is yours until whatever deadline. If you use UCAS, there's a UCAS deadline to make your final decision. But otherwise, as far as we're concerned, if we make you an offer, we want you, and so that offer is yours until you're able to make the decision based on everything else you've got going on.
that's fantastic. Thank you for that. And my last question for the day is, does it increase your chance of getting in if you apply earlier in the cycle?
Generally, I would say yes, just because depending on the subject, because popular subjects will get fuller. And we are admitting based on actual classroom sizes and things like that. So we are bearing in mind being able to physically accommodate the students that we're admitting. So the later you wait, the more likely we know we're reaching that number. So it generally speaking is a little bit easier the earlier you apply. And again, like I said before, you'll know sooner too, so that you can kind of get all of that sort of sorted out for you. Yep.
Fantastic, Candice. I have no other questions. I don't see any other questions coming in from the audience. I just wanted to thank you for taking time out and being with us today.
Definitely, I'm very glad to. I didn't see a place, normally there's a place I can type in and send it to everybody, but I'm glad for you to share my details if anybody follows up with you later.
I will definitely do
I am
that.
the main contact for people. So if for those of you that are in India, I am your person anyways. And so I'm always happy to WhatsApp, Skype, email, whatever. So, and once the pandemic, I guess, gets itself sorted out, I will be back at some point. We do have an office based in New Delhi too. So we have somebody that's physically in India who also happens to be an alum. So he can talk about his experiences when people are interested.
That's fantastic. I will share all of these details with the students, and I should let you know that I've recorded the video today, and through the Next Genius Foundation Network, I will also share it with the 1,500 schools from across the country.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Stay safe. Yeah, stay healthy.
You too.
Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.